Jen Sullivan, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I heard about you from your interview with Michael Sala. I watched that interview yesterday as a primer. I see you have a few books out and all. It was a nice interview, very enlightening about Atlantis and Lemuria, and you have some interesting past life story to tell. We'll go for an hour. Well, that's for the Patreon subscribers. About maybe 35-40 minutes into this interview, I'm going to make an announcement that the rest of this interview will be pay-per-view. Please subscribe to Patreon, listen to the rest of us, but the first 35-40 minutes will be free for everybody. So I guess let's try to get out your primary source information first. Oh, by the way, listeners, I'm happy to report that I've just created an account on Odyssey and linked all my YouTube videos to that channel. So that's a backup channel that everybody can watch and listen to. I guess if it's not too much trouble, if my listeners could perhaps listen on YouTube just for the sake of getting me a view credit and maybe get me some ad revenue, and then maybe go to Odyssey and listen to it on Odyssey to get me some blockchain revenue. It's up to you listeners whether you want to do that or not. So just wanted to get that out. So now I have two backups, Cost.tv and Odyssey, for all my shows. I guess the only reason I'm still not kicked off YouTube is because I only have about 6,500 subscribers, which sucks. I want more, but it's a blessing because they don't see me as a threat to the system. So I guess that's the only reason I'm still on there. But subscribers, please do consider subscribing. More subscribers, please do consider subscribing. And it really, really sucks to see that the amount of Patreon subscribers I can count on only one hand. I don't know what it is that's causing people to not want to subscribe to that, to listen to my shows in their entirety. It's am I not being nice when I ask you to do that? I don't know, but I know we're all stripped with money in this time of great recession, but if it's not too much trouble, please consider doing that, just because I work at Whole Foods, which I love doing because I love to eat and it's nice to get a discount there. It doesn't mean I can't make a little extra using this radio show. So enough babbling on my end. Jen Sullivan, why don't you tell your life story? And my God, you've got a very interesting life story regarding knowing your past lives. You got some help from Dolores Cannon's QHHT work with that. Something about you were once a queen or a princess in Lemuria, among other things. So I'm very interested in hearing what that's all about. So who are you? What did you experience that causes you to research the stuff you do, your QHHT experience? And please tell us about your past life and how you know it to be true, and then we'll maybe get into some Atlantis and Lemuria history and maybe how it ties into some stuff in the present day. So without further ado, you got the floor. I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I do not interrupt my guests, so I will put myself on mute, and while you are speaking, you got the floor.
Sounds good. I could tell you my whole life story, but I think I'll start off a little bit more in a timely manner. I'll go back to 2017, and maybe even just a little bit before that. Before all of this happened, I was a teacher, I was a business owner, I taught middle school. I was not really interested in Atlantis, Lemuria. I didn't know any of this kind of stuff. This wasn't something that revolved around me or my daily, work or research or anything like that. I had a bunch of kids. I taught every day. I went home, I cooked dinner, I cleaned my house, and I did what I had to do every day. And then in 2017, we had warning. We lived in the Florida Keys that in a couple of days, Hurricane Irma was going to make landfall, and we lived on a little tiny island. And I took my family and I fled out of Florida, and I got as far away from the storm as I could. And when we were able to get back to our house, everything was destroyed. The storm had come through. We had giant waves that came through, 13, 14 feet tall, that had come through, wiped out our house, wiped out our businesses, our cars, and everything. Like, we literally had the clothes on our back and the couple of bucks that we were able to kind of get out of Florida with. And my husband and I, we were devastated, and we realized we weren't going to get any help from anywhere. Our insurance companies were fighting with us. It was just a nightmare, to be honest, to just get anything done. And one morning, I woke up, and this is in the course of our recovery from rebuilding our home in Hurricane Irma. I woke up, and I couldn't see out of this eye. And I ended up going to an eye doctor. I went to a bunch of specialists. I went to the ER. I went to a whole bunch of different specialists up in Miami. And what they told me was that I had suddenly developed a condition called Pseudotumor Cerebri, which is a bunch of, it's almost like a tumor-like mass of water that starts growing in your brain and putting pressure on different things. So for me, it was on my eyes. It pushed a lot of pressure on the back of my eyes, and I couldn't see out of this eye anymore. The medication they gave me did not help. It only made it worse in a lot of ways. It added extra health problems onto me. It gave me kidney issues, which I'd never had before. So I was kind of stuck with my house in ruins, my life a mess. I couldn't see out of one eye. I have all these kids I need to take care of. We have no money coming in. And I was just like, what are we going to do? I have no idea what I have to do next. And a friend of mine who I've known through the school systems, our children all went to school together, and we used to, play them and have play dates and whatnot. She came to me and she asked me if I was interested in doing any type of healing hypnosis sessions with her, that she needed to do a project for her QHHT program that she learned from Dolores Cannon and Julia Cannon. And it was just going to be kept private. She was going to film it. She was going to submit it so that she can get her level 3 master hypnosis degree. And that was it. So we started doing these sessions. And after the first session, I immediately felt relief coming out from behind my right eye. It was like the pressure came down, all of this draining sensation started, and I started understanding a little bit more about past lives. That was nothing I'd ever done before. I'd never tried past life regression hypnosis. I'd never really been curious, to be honest, about my past life. So it was very new for me and very different, but I enjoyed the feeling that it gave me afterwards, the relief. The pressure was gone on my eye. It was better than any medication I had taken so far for my condition. So over the course of 2 years, I did session after session with the practitioner. Her name is cerebrospinal, and she goes by the name of a holistic hypnotist. And over the course of the 2 years, all of these past life stories started coming out, and I didn't realize they were anything special until Sarah started telling me that other clients of hers were having similar past life regression hypnosis things where they would go back to the places of Atlantis, Lemuria, whatever you want to call them, but these lost lands that were destroyed during like a big cataclysm. So that's kind of like where I've come from with all of this. I didn't really come from an area of knowledge and past lives or Atlantis, Lemuria. I kind of just got sucked into it and found a lot of relief from my health condition through these past life regression hypnosis sessions she would do with me. Usually about once a week we would have them. So with that, one of the most, I'm not sure if you want me to keep going on or if you'd like to ask anything at this point. I know I've spoken quite a bit.
No. It's all right. Please continue. And then
You got it. No problem. So there are several different past lives that we were able to get in touch with. We were able to understand a bit better. And every time I understood them better, I felt like different things in my life started clarifying and started getting better, started making more sense to me. I realized a lot of my life was just a life of conditioning. It was something that I had been taught. It was something that I had been kind of conditioned to behave and become, and I wasn't really being my true self in a lot of different ways. And through a lot of her sessions, I really understood a lot of myself better. And with that, just so much in my life started opening up for me. I really found a lot of comfort in the past life of the one that I was in my most previous last life, and that was in the 1970s in New York City. And Sarah writes about this one in her book, but I ended up finding out that I did have these past lives in Atlantis and Lemuria in my past life, and I tried to explain it to people like I've done in this life, but because of the timing and what was going on in my life, I was not taken seriously. I was institutionalized, and I eventually killed myself in that lifetime just because nobody would listen to the ramblings of a young woman who was trying to explain her past lives to people. So with that, we got past that, and Sarah wanted to know more about the past life that I was trying to explain to people that made me kind of, be ostracized by society. So that lifetime was when I lived in Lemuria. probably 50,000 years ago is what I kept understanding in the sessions. But in this lifetime, I was the daughter of the queen. And we lived a beautiful, simple life. We lived a life with, I want to say it's like a power of not healing, but like an immunity on our island that allowed people to not really receive disease. You know, you had death, you had birth, you had accidents, but nobody really got sick and died on our island. And we had visitors come. They were searching for something to help them cure a virus that was on their island. And it all kind of stems back to this red crystal. And I know it could get a little bit confusing, but the red crystal is something that came with us from what we would call the home planet. And through these sessions, we understood that these people from Lemuria and Atlantis were all the descendants of an ET program, a colonization program that had happened ages and ages and ages before, where they had come from a different planet. They had sprinkled lots of, genetic whatever fluff around, abandoned it for a while to see what would happen, and then came back to these people to try to, what's the word I would use, try to upgrade them in a lot of ways, and to help with this integration of people from the old world, this home planet, and the new world. So being the descendants of both of this colonization program, Atlantis and Lemuria had a lot of issues that they needed to kind of work through. And it ended up being a situation where we kind of destroyed each other at the end of the day. One with massive technology that caused a huge series of waves that wiped out Lemuria, and then with a similar technology using the red crystals that had an electrical, energetic mishap, is what I would more or less call it, for Atlantis, and destroyed that. So that's kind of what I talk about in my book, Child of the Universe, is just me understanding these past lives, healing my brain and my issue from understanding my past lives, and kind of moving on from them and seeing how it affects my everyday life. And I've completely changed my life as a result of having this experience. I uprooted my family. We were able to move to Hawaii and get out of the Florida Keys. So no more hurricanes, hopefully, for us at this point. And the whole experience has just been an incredibly positive one for me, even though it's usually the subject matter is a bit out there for me. I embrace it. I feel it's a part of who I am at this point, and I feel that other people could truly benefit from understanding more of their past lives or past life trauma and how it affects their life now. You may be completely oblivious to it, but that, stomach problem you've had for months, or that aching shoulder you've had for years, or that knee problem that just won't go away, I think our minds are working in very specific ways to help us overcome things that have traumatized us before that we need to come to terms with. And that's kind of the lesson that I received in all of it.
Well, thank you for that interesting story. Now, when it comes to the time frames of Atlantis and Lemuria, there's great confusion here. Perhaps you can clear it up. It is some say that Lemuria came before Atlantis. Others say they actually existed at the same time. Others say that there was many Lemurias and many Atlantises going back many thousands upon millions of years over the course of Earth's history, because time is cyclical. Also, when we're talking about how many years ago these civilizations are, or anything else is for that matter, we have to understand time is an illusion, and different entities of different consciousness experience it differently. And they say anything from the fourth dimension above doesn't actually experience time in anything other than the present sense. So there is really no past or future, and there is no sense of reaction in the present moment. That's Jim Self talking. He says the present is reactionary in our third dimension, but there is no reactionary sense, no sense of reaction to what happened in the past or what may happen in the future in the higher level consciousness. So when we're talking about time, and how long ago these things were, when you say it happened X amount of years ago, we measure time in years. Year is measured by the amount of time it takes for the Earth to orbit the Sun, 365 days, and yes, one starting point when it takes all the way to go around back to that same starting point. But we have to realize many years ago, the Earth may have had a different orbit in space. In fact, people study the work of David Talbot and the Saturn myth would know that would believe the solar system was completely different in terms of its layout. Like the planet Saturn was so much closer that it could actually be seen as like a second sun in the sky, and the planets Venus and Mars were actually in front of Saturn and created this amazing image in the sky. And if that's the case, then how long a day would have been different than it is now, and how long a year would have been different than it is now. If you're not an expert on this subject, well, then I guess maybe I'm not going to ask you to speculate if you don't want to speculate, but exactly how do we determine how many years ago something is, not just Atlantis and Lemuria, but anything else? And well, let's get into that question first, then I'll ask you some others, because I don't want to confuse you too much with too many questions in one sitting.
Yeah, so no problem. Well,
factor.
The best way I can explain it is this. In my sessions, I was curious about that as well, because I also feel that time is a man-made constraint, and it's something that we have evolved to kind of revolve around. Now, I looked into the sessions with Sarah, and I tried to understand a bit better about how our past lives, our future lives, and our present lives all work together. And the answer I was given is that if you imagine us all in bubbles, now, every lifetime we've ever had is a bubble. Every lifetime we're in at this moment, we could be in more than one is a bubble. We all coexist together in this mass of large spherical kinds of, I wouldn't even say sacs, but just these hypothetical bubbles that all coexist together like a mass of atoms. And it creates something larger, which is our existence throughout time. So you could be having a past life while you're living your present life, also looking into your future life. You could be having two present lives at one time, being completely unaware of each other. And that was kind of the answer I was given, that time is an illusion, and you can kind of put things on a linear timeline to help people who are unable to understand or grasp the concept of time being an illusion. But more or less, everything also does have an ebb and flow. It has a way of progressing and evolving, sometimes de-evolution as well. And it's all very specific to the individual. And that's why we all tend to have different reactions, different understandings, and different perceptions of things. So I think it goes a bit more into the metaphysical when you try to understand timeliness or timelines when it comes to past lives, present lives, future lives, if that explains it at all.
Thank you. And in the case of how many Atlantises there were and how many Lemurias there were, now I interviewed Mark Kimmel way back in the day, and he talks about Atlantis and Lemuria being hundreds of thousands of years ago, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought Atlantis, the most recent one, ended around 10,500 BC with a great cataclysm on Earth. And Lemuria, it's understood that Lemuria existed like 900,000 years ago, or something like that. And I'm asking him, where are you getting this claim that Atlantis was hundreds of thousands of years ago and Lemuria was X amount of millions of years ago? And the only answer he could give me that he could think of was, these ETs are giving me the these explanations, and they perceive time differently as us. So let's just say that because they perceive time, they're going to give us different numbers. That's the only answer he could give. But do you resonate with that? And also, how many Atlantises and Lemurias were there? Was there actually an infinite amount of them? Well, there couldn't have been an infinite amount of them, because if Earth was created 4.4 billion years ago, as mainstream science says, not that mainstream science is right about a lot of things, but if that is the case, then we can't go any further back than that, can we? So, any idea? And how many Atlantises and Lemurias there were?
Well, I could tell you in my book, I write about a couple of different versions of it. And versions, when I say versions, I don't mean different examples of it. Lemuria and Atlantis, the land masses that held those people, existed over a vast amount of time. There wasn't just 1 or 7. There was a time period, or time period as you'd like to call it, where it began, where it was beginning the colonization efforts, and then it continued through a very long period of time until their destruction. So people may have different past life memories or different kinds of interpretations of messages they've received, but it's very specific to that specific part of that, what you'd call that landmass or that colony's development. So people might be remembering very early times when ETs first came and colonized it. They may remember later times where there were energetic mishaps in Atlantis before the destruction. They may remember times when the Great Wave, came and destroyed Lemuria. I think people have not lived all through Atlantis. They have not lived all through Lemuria. So you're going to remember specific parts because that's when your past life took place in that, not you lived through the entire existence of this place. You know, I think that's more or less where some of the confusion might come from for people, is you were there for a specific period of time, achieving a certain thing for your eternal development and your eternal goals as a higher being, and that's when you came, that's what you saw, that's what you experienced, and that's what you remember. Other stuff did happen, but you may have not been there to experience it, so you are unaware of it.
Thank you. Now, in regards to the location of Atlantis and Lemuria, the kind of great confusion there is it's not really, it's a tricky question. In my understanding of it, based on what I've seen, is that there really was no one given location. Atlantis and Lemuria were both global civilizations with colonies all over the world. There was, I guess you could say, there was a de facto global headquarters for Atlantis and Lemuria. In the case of Lemuria, it would have been a great landmass in the Pacific Ocean, where the remnants of that is Hawaii and the Polynesian Islands. Mm-hmm. And in the Atlantic Ocean, there was a great landmass that did exist many years ago. And one of the remnants of that is, maybe the only remnant, is the island of Bermuda. However, it shouldn't be thought of as Atlantis and Lemuria having been just those places. They did have colonies all over the world. In the case of Atlantis, they would have had colonies in Egypt and maybe even in Indonesia. And Lemuria, well, sort of same there. Maybe not the same places, but definitely around the world. Is that correct? They were continents in the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, big supercontinents that don't exist anymore, but they were actually global civilizations. So it's kind of wrong to say there is a location for those civilizations.
I relate to what you're speaking about. I found that in my sessions, I could see that Lemuria, during the time that I spoke about being part of this royal family, Lemuria was a huge colony that spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. So many different islands, land masses. I would count different places such as Aboriginal Australia as part of it. I would definitely look at parts of Japan. I would look at India, Sri Lanka. Of course, the land masses would have been a bit different at that time because of, natural issues with land masses rising and falling and weather changes and patterns, but that whole area of the Pacific would have been heavily influenced by Lemurian culture, and with their rules, their regulations, it was something that people wanted to be a part of. At the time of the history that I was looking at Atlantis, they were specifically a bit closer to Egypt, but between Egypt and Bermuda in that area, and they kind of colonized between Egypt and between Bermuda, but more or less were keeping to themselves at this point. They had found that they were more technologically advanced than other people around, and they wanted that superiority, and they weren't looking to conquer. They were looking to self-develop without the influence of others at that point in time, and that's what I understood.
Yes, I did have a past life in Atlantis. Ted Marr, he and I actually ran a shop of some sort in Atlantis, and I've had a chance to have a past life pilgrimage to Atlantis, going to Bermuda, but I've never actually had a past life pilgrimage opportunity to go to Hawaii or one of the Polynesian Islands. Love to do that at some point. Now you say you were the daughter of a queen. I'm kind of interested to know how exactly would Atlantis and Lemuria, why would they actually want to have a king or a queen? I mean, just ask the founding fathers of America, they would cringe at the idea of America having a king or queen, because it's like going to turn into a flat out dictatorship. One person wanted to rule everything. So you got to create a republic in which there's many politicians representing the majority and the minority of the common people in the country. So out of curiosity, how could Atlantis and Lemuria have a king or queen without that king or queen wanting to rule over everybody? How could that king or queen control their own consciousness and their own willpower to not want to rule over everybody? How did that
Well, for Atlantis, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I'm done.
No worries. Atlantis had a bit of a different situation than Lemuria, but eternally both of their leaders came from a hybridization program that consisted of ETs mixing genetics with the humans that had been left to evolve that they had planted here on Earth. So when they came forward to kind of understand who would be their leaders, it was these hybrid children that were conditioned and taught to use these powers that had come from the home planet to make these communities better in order to help promote more of a message of togetherness, of I would actually look at Lemuria as more of like a socialistic type of republic, where we had two types of leadership. One was the matriarchy that came from the family that I had been involved in my past life, and it was a series of women who continuously led people, but led them through a series of I guess you would call them meditations, where they would meditate and they would find answers, similar to how you would see in like ancient Delphi in Greece. You would have these sages that would receive answers from another place, and it would guide the people. And that was how that was functioning. It wasn't a control, it wasn't a power thing. It was, we were able to receive these messages that were able to help guide the people. And in addition, there was a group of men called the Nakal that led everyone spiritually. So there was definitely not just one person in charge, and that definitely helps remove the idea of, a dictatorship, a republic gone wrong, all of that kind of nonsense. It kept everyone in check. There was also, the culture of Lemuria was not one of looking to control another person. It was not part of who they were. They were very different in that sense. They were very content to just let others be, to help. Similar to what I see actually here in my new home in Hawaii, there was an aloha to everything that people did. It was looking to help mutual beneficial, guaranteed continuation through these means. In Atlantis, it was a bit different. The creator of Atlantis, not the landmass, but the city that was built there, was also an ET that went to go into continue his hybridization program, but did it in a way that was very cruel to the people and created more slaves rather than a community. So this whole continuation of Atlantis is all about them overthrowing their dictator, regaining their sense of self, and learning how to rule themselves. And actually, I write about this in my book. It's a big chapter in it, is how Atlantis actually does throw off their evil overlords in many ways and tries to reclaim their republic. And it's just a little too late for them at that point.
Yes, you say it was a socialist system. I've said many times that the only reason capitalism works better than socialism on planet Earth is because we live on a planet where money exists. If money didn't exist and technology was not suppressed that could provide for everybody, we could have a socialist system. That's basically what all the other ET races in the cosmos that don't have money, which is basically everybody except us, according to Alex Collier, they have for all intents and purposes, a socialist system where money doesn't exist and technology is not suppressed. So socialism can work as a system there. You mentioned just now the founder of Atlantis. Was that the Greek god Poseidon, or is that a myth that has been blown out of proportion?
I understood his name to be Atlas, or to call him Atlas, or call the being that he was Atlas. And that was where the name came from, that he named the city after himself. And the idea and the mythology of Poseidon is derived from the hybrid humans that he was, manipulating and working with, them misunderstanding what he was. Instead of thinking he's an ET, perceiving him as a god. And I think a lot of history if you look back, there's a lot of perceptions of gods and angels and whatnot. And it's more likely, what I understand, to be just ET contact that we were not evolved enough to understand completely.
Thank you. Now, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis has said that the Archon control system, which thankfully has been cannibalizing itself since 2011 and has to keep cannibalizing itself in order to sustain itself. Hopefully it won't be too long before they cannibalize themselves entirely to the point where we can be totally free on Earth. But Bartzis has said that the Archon control system has existed in some way, shape, or form for 900,000 years. And if that's the case, then, well, Atlantis and Lemuria must have been victims to it in some way. And the interesting about the 900,000 year ago date, there is a god from Mayan mythology named Bolon Yokte. Eric von Daniken asserted that there's a glyph that says on December 21st, 2012, the god Bolon Yokte would descend from heaven. Bolon Yokte is not really an understood god, according to this guy who is a curator of a Mayan, some Mayan place, museum of some sort. But it is said that Bolon Yokte would have arrived on Earth 900,000 years ago, which leads me to wonder, okay, is the god Bolon Yokte connected in some way to the Archon control system that has been in existence for 900,000 years? And if so, if the Archon control system did exist in Lemuria, they obviously couldn't have been a perfect civilization. They would have had to have maybe not many, but flaws, because they would have been manipulated. Can you speak to this? And do you know anything about Bolon Yokte being connected to the Archons, and how did the Archons manipulate Atlantis and Lemuria 900,000 years ago onward to prevent them from being a perfect civilization?
That's going to be a little hard for me to answer because I'm actually not familiar with either subject. A lot of this stuff is still very new to me, and it's something I'm just not, I haven't experienced in my past life regressions. It's possibly because I just had never came into contact with it, or perhaps it was removed from my memories for some reason. I've noticed that sometimes that does happen to people. They'll be protected from themselves from remembering certain things, but I really wish I could give you a better understanding of that. But I just know that there's a very vast, long history there with so much more that's happened beyond the lifetimes I remembered. So if other people do remember the, I'm sorry, you said it's the Archon project?
Yeah, the Archon control system.
Archon control systems, yeah, it's just a new concept for me. A lot of this is, to be honest, the more I've gotten into these interviews and understanding the worlds around Atlantis, Lemuria, and ETs, I'm just learning so much new stuff from people that definitely makes sense once I start looking it up and I see where it fits in. But I have to be completely honest, I wasn't really a big follower of a lot of this stuff until recently.
All right, fair enough. Now, these red crystals that you speak of, interesting how the crystals are red. I would think that the crystals would have to either be clear colored, because when a crystal is lacking color, I mean, a color, you're talking like, that's getting into chakra stuff. That's getting into specific parts, because colors have each color has specific qualities, specific traits. So color red, I'm kind of familiar with that color. It has a lot to do with passion, love, energy. But the idea that it would have to do with really high consciousness, it could, but I would think that a clear crystal like quartz would be like that, or maybe a purple crystal like amethyst, because we're talking crown chakra level there. But you say this crystal was red. That's root chakra. That's all the way down at the bottom. But you say this crystal has great power. So out of curiosity, what does the color red have to do with it? Or does it have anything to do with it? Are we just throwing this the wrong way? Because, George Kavaslis he said that the chakra system and all, he doesn't follow that. He doesn't believe anybody should follow it because he says that it's a manipulated thing that was created in Atlantean times to suppress us from realizing our true heart soul essence, and that's where everything is at. Although I can't help but wonder how he can't get his chakras involved and not get bored in life, because you need a little variety. What's wrong with getting your chakras involved and have a little fun in life? And not if he can go with the heart all the time and not get bored, more power to him. But the point is, you're thinking, we're talking about colors, you're talking about chakras, you're talking about specifics, you're suppressing the full consciousness potential. So how does that factor this, and why the color red? What does the color red have to do with this?
You got it. Well, this is what I remember from the sessions. The crystal, when I was first shown it, was a deep red. It wasn't a clear crystal. It wasn't very easy to see through it. It was almost a large circular shape, the one that I was first seeing, and it was multifaceted to the point where it had maybe 30, 40 different facets that had been kind of cut or created within the crystal's formation. I just remember the color of the red being so deep and so dark that it was almost, it reminded me of like blood before it comes out of the body. You know, it's that deep, dark kind of red, or after it comes out of the body, that deepness. And that was the only connection I really saw. I don't know much about chakras. Again, that's like stuff that's all kind of becoming new to me. A lot of people have told me, though, that Hawaii itself is shaped like the chakras, that the formation of the islands here all fall into chakra level, starting with Kauai and ending here on the big island of Hawaii, and with the big island being the root chakra at the base. So I don't know if that has any connection to it whatsoever, but that's really my vast experience with chakras and how it would play into all of that. I know there was a long history in Atlantis of them getting in touch with themselves, with them reclaiming what was taken away from them during that period of hybridization and, slavery, and creating this whole big city that they had been forced to build. So perhaps it was a time in their history where they were able to depend on the chakras to help align them. I'm not 100% sure about that, but chakras could very well just be a brand new thing over the last couple of thousand years we've kind of come up with to help ourselves get through things, balance ourselves again. But the crystals themselves, I'm writing about them right now in my second book and talking a bit more about where they come from and the history it had in extraterrestrial, intergalactic usage. And it was something that was originally mined on a planet not too far from what I would call the home planet, or the planet that these colonizers came from. And they also used a bit of slave labor from another race to kind of mine it. And these crystals help them power their interstellar technology in order for them to come and start colonizing other planets. And they were the key for them to be able to continue this progression of themselves into further reaches of the universe. Then they were kind of stuck on this planet. And the planet that they were stuck on, they understood was dying. So the crystals indefinitely helped them get off the planet, to get their species out of there before it was too late. And here we are. So I also think the red crystals are something that people should not be looking for. I get a lot of questions from readers asking where they are and what they are. And to be honest, I think that in our hands, especially in our unevolved minds, we're not able to utilize them for truly good purposes. We end up just kind of succumbing to the power that they have. I don't think we need any more of that around here.
Okay. Now, you mentioned history. A lot of things have changed over history, and one thing I've heard is that the moon is a relatively recent thing in Earth's history. It may have actually not been around Earth over. It may have actually come to Earth as early as the time of ancient Sumeria, like 4,000 BC, 6,000 years ago. Although I don't know if Alex Collier would agree with that. I think he said that the moon was brought to the solar system sooner than that. Maybe it wasn't near Earth until 6,000 years ago, but it would have been brought to the solar system sooner. But was there a moon during the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, or was Earth actually moonless? And if it was moonless, Well, that flies in the face of what mainstream science says, that we need a moon to have life on Earth. Well, no, we don't. It's not that they don't have a high enough consciousness to understand how things work. So, can you speak about the moon and how was Earth lacking a moon during Atlantis and Lemurian times?
I actually write prolifically about the moon in my book, and especially in Lemuria. In Atlantis, I was a prisoner for almost 60 years. I rarely saw the outside world, but in my older years, I did, and I remember seeing the sun and the moon and the stars. And though they looked, the stars were in different formations than they are now. The moon in Lemuria was just breathtaking. It was large, it was big, it felt like it was closer, like it was just this massive, cookie in the sky we could almost reach up and grab kind of deal. It was very, very much there for me. But for other people who may experience something differently, you have to understand I believe there's alternate dimensions, as many dimensions and possibilities of existence on this life as we have people thinking. And there may have been a very different dimension that could have opened up for people where that didn't happen, where there was no moon, where they were able to prolifically live and exist without having tides or winds or anything that would have been associated with the gravitational pull of the moon. So I wouldn't say that it's incorrect that if there was no moon, but I do recall in my sessions seeing a very beautiful moon.
Thank you. Alex Scholar pointed out that the moon used to be a lot more beautiful than it is now, but so I can imagine it was more pretty when you looked at it in your time, if it was around that long ago. Okay, at this point, I think I'm gonna say, all listeners, please do consider subscribing on Patreon to listen to the rest of this interview and all the interviews that I've done since the starting point, whenever that was, when I started having my shows pay-per-view for the last third or so of the interviews. The rest of this interview will be pay-per-view. Please do consider subscribing. With that little note out now,